Hi everyone, in this video I'm going to show you the basics of embroidery, how to set up the embroidery hoop and like how to thread the needle and like some of the basic stitches needed for the embroidery itself. So let's get started. Hopefully you have the embroidery hoop, the fabric, the floss and the needles. These are the main things that you need for now. So how you have to start is just like unscrew the little screw top and then pop this off, and you can see like this is the outer ring and this is the inner ring. So you need to put the inner ring on a flat surface and then take your piece of embroidery material like the cotton fabric or linen even, and put it on top of it and make sure you've centered it, and then put the outer hoop on top of the inner hoop and the fabric. So as you can see already the fabric's a little stretched. So now all you have to do is re-screw it, twist it, re-screw it, make it a little tighter, and when it's like halfway tight, you can pull the fabric a little bit like this to make it a little bit more tight. So we need it as tight as possible, but be careful not to stretch it too much. What happens if you stretch too much is that sometimes if the fabric, especially if the fabric's a little thin, what happens is the fabric might tear in this area. So you need to be gentle about it and sort of pull the fabric and make sure the fabric is stretched very nicely, and like tighten it a little bit more. Yeah. Now that your hoop is ready, let's set up the needle. Just grab your needle and then take your embroidery floss, and there's going to be a couple of strands that are like, loose, but make sure you find the strand that's coming from inside. Like there's one strand that, I hope you can see, there's one strand that's like near the outside, and then there's one strand, the second strand, that's coming from like inside of the floss. So pull the floss, like the thread, the strand that's coming from the inside, so that it will smoothly come off. So let's just take some floss. Yeah, this is fine, and you can cut it off. And now you'll have to thread the needle. So if you have like a needle threader, it's a small equipment sort of thing that can be used to thread the needle quickly, but I just have to try and get the thread inside the needle side. Okay, now that the needle is like, you've threaded the needle, make sure the needle is in between, like correctly in the middle of the thread. So what you can do is you can line up both the ends of the thread and get the needle to fall down, not fall down, but get to the center of it. Okay, so yeah, now the needle and the thread, the embroidery floss is ready. What you can do, the next step is knotting the ends of it. For that, what you have to do is just make a little, I hope you can see, make a little thing like this, and then tie it into a knot basically. Put the other little end through it and then like tighten it. And then there's a bit of loose thread in the end, so you can just like clip it off. We just need a little bit. I hope you can see. Yeah, we just need that much. So yeah, so now we have the hoop ready and the thread ready. There's one more thing I want to mention before we get started with embroidery. Make sure the fabric that's outside the hoop is a little uniform. So mine's not very uniform. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my scissors and I'm going to like trim it a little to make sure that there's not too much fabric left out. So what happens when there's too much fabric left out is that, one second. Yeah, so what happens if there's too much fabric is that it will interfere interfere with your embroidery, and it will be a little uncomfortable to do the embroidery properly. So just trim it. It will save a lot of effort if you just do this little step. So I'm almost done. Okay, that's that. So now it looks even and like not too long. So this is perfect. Make sure that your screw is tight, and the embroidery, like the hoop, is holding the fabric a little firmly. So we can start now. So I'm going to just, I don't really know the exact names of the stitches, but yeah, let's just get on with it. So for the first stitch, what you have to do is take the embroidery, take the needle with the thread attached, of course, and put it like through the fabric from the back side of it, right? So just, I hope you can see, just poke it through from the back side and pull it out. So what happens is the knot we made in the beginning, it will stop the thread from coming through. So it will be sort of stuck there, and we can start doing the embroidery. And the first one, let's do like a straight stitch. So what we can do is we can do maybe like 1/2 centimeter. Okay. So if this is the main, the first stitch, just go on top of it like a 1/2 centimeter and pull it through. So yeah, so that's our first stitch, right? So it's a little stitch. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go back and let's flip it here. So this is the main one, and then the first one, and like what we can do is just on top of the second one actually we did. Let's make another little, pass the needle through that so that it passes out like this. So that's that, and as you can see there's a little gap in between. That's fine. It's very this stitch is very easy to practice. So if you want to practice for the first few times, like you're trying embroidery, this is the perfect way to do it, so that you can do the stitching while still so yeah, I hope you can see this. So there's a little white part in between the stitches, and that's because we left a little gap in the when we stitched backside. So so this is one stitch, right? So now that we have like one small line of stitch, I'm gonna show you how to sort of seal this line. So what you have to do is flip it back, and then take your scissors and like cut off the thread maybe like a few centimeters. Don't cut it too low, because if you cut it too low, it'll be hard to tie. So just do it like maybe at here, so it's easier for you to just make a knot. Just tie it. There's nothing special about it. Just tie it off like you would tie maybe a shoelace. Just a basic tie. And do it once more just to be safe that it won't become loose. Okay, so now we can see that it's tied up, and there's like a bit of loose thread, hanging about. So what we'll do is we'll cut it off like the same way we did the first one. We are going to cut it off at like 1/2 centimeter. So there it goes. So you have like a okay, so we have like a perfect embroidery line. So that is the first kind of stitch I'm gonna show you. I've shown you, and now let's go on to the second kind of stitch, where we'll prevent these little white white bits in the middle of the line. So I'll show you how to do that. Just take the same embroidery thread with the needle and tie it again like we did the first time, so that just one little knot is fine. Nothing too much. Oh, 1 second. And trim it. And then let's follow the same thing. So this is number 1. Let me write it down so that it won't be confusing. So this is stitch number 1. Okay, now let's do number 2. Let's start it from yeah. Okay. So just take the needle and like the same way, just bring the needle through the fabric, number 1. Then put it back in. And now what we're going to do is we're going to turn it around. I'll show you how to do it. We're going to turn it around, and the same distance that we used here, we'll like the same distance that we used here, we'll use to bring the needle through, and we'll pass the needle through the same little hole that this stitch made. I hope you can see that. Just pass it through that that hole itself, so that if you can see, there is no little white gap. See, in the number 1 we saw the little white gap. Here there is no gap, right? And in the back, if you see, it is like this. So we can repeat the same process. Like we can bring the needle through the little hole that we made for stitch number 2, right? And make another little stitch, right? Oops. And then go back, same length of stitch, bring it through the previous stitch that we made, pass it through, previous stitch, bring it through. Okay, so I hope you can see the difference between these both stitches. So in the first one, like I said, there's a little bit of white gaps, white little spots in between the line, and the second one there's no white gap, so it's sort of like a smooth line. So this is stitch number 2, and the same thing we have to do. Cut the thread off. Oh, 1 second. So cut the thread off like maybe a few centimeters and tie it up so that the stitch doesn't come loose. A couple of knots, that will do, and then trim it. Okay, so stitch number 3 is going to be sort of a different kind of stitch where you stitch through the previous stitches. I hope that makes sense. I'll show you right now. So just do the same procedure of tying up the thread end and then trimming it off, and then let's do the same thing of passing the needle through the fabric, maybe half a centimeter. And now it's the interesting part. So what we're going to do is like when we do it from the back side, we're going to pass through the stitch. So let me show you. So when you flip here, as you can see, this is the main stitch that we made, and so just like halfway between the knot and the place where the stitch comes out, let's just make a little hole. And when you look from here, you can see that the needle passes through the center of the stitch. I hope that made sense. So the next step would be making the same length, like half a centimeter. We'll do a half a centimeter stitch starting from the center of here. So it will be somewhere here. Right? Now when we flip it, it is going to be in the middle of the second stitch, right? So the middle of the second stitch would be the beginning of, the ending of the first stitch, like the back side of this part. One second. Yeah. So the back side of this part. So we'll just go back and pass the needle through it, but making sure that it comes through the center of it. And then again half a centimeter, and then pass the stitch through the back side of the previous stitch, and make sure it comes through the center of the stitch, and then once more. Okay, more, and one final one. Okay, now I'm going to like tie it off like we did in the previous lines. Okay, a couple of knots. Trim it off. Okay. So as you can see, there's difference between three of these stitches. Stitch number 1 is very light and it has little spaces in between each stitch, and it looks a little light. And stitch number 2 is a little bit more stronger looking, since it doesn't have like the gap between the stitches. And stitch number 3, as you can see, it is a lot thicker compared to stitch number 1 or 2. Because we've stitched through the stitches, so that makes it a little thicker. So the benefit of using, there's benefits for using each stitch. So this will look nice for certain kind of designs, this will look nice for certain designs, and this will look nice for certain designs. So we will, like, more than me teaching you, when you start doing this and when you start exploring with different kinds of stitches, what happens is you will figure out what looks best for what kind of design. So that is the part that you're going to explore. I'm going to show you the basics of it. You're going to explore and create your own designs. I'm not going to show you how to create. Like, I'm going to show you how to get to a point where you can create your own designs. I hope that makes sense. Yeah, and one final stitch, and this is a pretty fun stitch. So I'll show you, just not the end of the thread. Trim it off, and we have like a bit of thread left. So usually we can use the thread till till we finish till like maybe here. After that it's a little hard to stitch, so after that, like maybe till after this, you'll just have to cut it off and like use a new thread. But yeah, so far it's good. So what we'll do, this is called the French knot. So this can be used for making like small little flowers. Let me just mark it, number 4. So what you're going to do is we're going to pass the same process, pass the needle through the back of the fabric, bring it up. Now I'll show you after putting it down, okay? So now what we're going to do is we're going to hold the thread straight with one hand, with the left hand, and with the right hand take it behind the thread, take the needle behind the thread, and then sort of make a loop, right? And then one more loop. and then one more loop. Usually it's 3 loops. You can do more or less, but I'll show you with the basic 3 loops. And then you have to pass it through the same point or like a little bit near that point.